Hi everyone, it's Laura Renner here, the founder of Freedom Makers. I'm going to start doing these videos live every week. At first I was doing them every other week in a Facebook group, and then that group discontinued those, and so I thought I'd just run them live in our own page. And they were every other week, but I'm going to go ahead and start doing them every week for a while and see how it goes. Part of the fun of running a business is you try new things. So I went ahead and got this fancy microphone. I have no idea how the sound is turning out. When I've tested it, it doesn't seem to sound any different, but apparently microphones really help. So if I won't know until the video uploads how the sound is going. So if any of you are watching now and you want to let me know if you can hear me okay or not, because sometimes I feel like it's easier or it's louder just to go with the computer speakers. But anyway, so today I wanted to share with you about what an after action review about an interview I gave a few weeks ago, and I've included the link in the post. So if you want to go check out that interview or that podcast, it was really neat. It was with the podcast is called Nourishing Real Talk. And it was just a way for people to have like a legit conversation about entrepreneurship, about running a business, because I think oftentimes we have to put on this brave face about how great everything is. And maybe that's part of our culture, but also, you have to in order to make sales, right? Like everyone knows entrepreneurship is difficult and it's not a smooth ride, but you can't really let people know that. One, I think because in American culture, we have this fear of failure, but two, because that could impact sales. And so you have to put on this brave face. So anyway, it's just nice to have a place where we could have a real conversation and not really worry about things like that. And Jenna and Lindsay are amazing. It was a great conversation. So I really encourage you to check out the rest of their episodes because they're just, it's nourishing real talk. It started off with Jenna and Lindsay talking about what they've been up to lately. And Lindsay shared that she's going to the Museum of Ice Cream. And yes, there is a Museum of Ice Cream down in LA. And I'm so jealous and so excited for her and can't wait to hear how it goes. And then Jenna shared about an interior design app that she discovered, and she seems to really like it. And so I think it'd be fun to listen to them and hear their insights into those things. And then with my interview, one of the things we talked about is entrepreneurs with multiple passions. And I think, especially in American culture, we have there's this kind of carryover from the old days where, you went and worked at a company for 30 years and then you retired and their pension was what you lived off of after you retired. And we still kind of have that mentality, even though that model doesn't really exist anymore. We still have that mentality of, you find one thing that you just can't live without doing, or you can't breathe if you're not doing it. And that's your passion, and that's what you should pursue your whole life. But there are a lot of us who, there are multiple things we're passionate about. And so then in a way, like we feel like we're doing something wrong because it doesn't fit within that model. And so we talk about that a little bit in the interview. And it was funny to me because in the interview, I said, oh yeah, I just had this idea for a parking app. Has nothing to do with Freedom Makers, although we could certainly, roll it out within Freedom Makers. And when I listened back to that, we recorded that interview maybe 6 weeks ago or so. And when I listened back to that, I kind of chuckled because I had to stop for a second. I was like, wait, I vaguely remember that, when I had the idea, I was so excited about it. I was like, Freedom Makers, we're going to be the new queen of paid parking. We're going to run this. And then 6 weeks later, I'm like, parking app, what idea was that? And so that's part of what I talk about in the interview as well, is part of when you have multiple passions or when you have new ideas all the time, how do you weed through them to know which ones are legit and which ones are just kind of the idea of the week? And one of the things I said is give it time. And if over time you're still passionate about it, then that is a valid idea. And so here we are 6 weeks later, and I vaguely even remember this parking app idea that I was so excited about back then. And so, but another thing we talked about in the interview was something that I would like to try to do. And I mentioned that I have been considering starting my own podcast. And so I'm happy to say that I am still pursuing that. And that's something that I'll be launching probably within the next few months, I think. And so I'm still getting that. That's also part of why I got this fancy microphone, because apparently you can tell the difference on podcasts when someone has a real microphone and someone doesn't. So I'm trying that out. And then another thing is, they at the end, they do sort of like rapid fire questions or whatnot. And one of the things they asked me is, what is a guilty pleasure? And they brought up that they like to run errands during the middle of the day. They'll go grocery shopping or get a pedicure or something like that. And part of the reason why is they can, but also there's no lines. And I mentioned that I actually feel kind of guilty about it. And so it was just kind of a reminder about how we have these self-created rules about what's acceptable or what's not acceptable. But I realized afterward that part of the reason why I feel guilty is, I'll think, okay, I'm going to go do errands A, B, and C. And then while I'm out, I'll be like, oh, well, let me add D, E, and F. And so if I thought I'd get back by 3 p.m., and instead I don't get back till 4:30, then I feel like I've wasted that time when I could have been doing something on the business. And then I feel guilty about that. But yesterday I went to the store, and part of, if any of you are not in Oakland, for whatever reason, the grocery store lines are amazingly long. Now, they're amazingly long for American standards, but even like Safeway has a sign that says, if there's more than 3 people in line, we'll open up another register. Well, pretty much every Safeway I ever go to in Oakland has way more than 3 people, and they're not opening up other registers. And there's a couple reasons, I think, for that. Who knows how accurate these are, but one is because the cost of living is so high that it's hard to find people to work for these low wage jobs because they can't afford to stay here. And then the commute time is so long. So do you even, go bother to take a job at a Safeway in Oakland or whatnot? So I just feel like everywhere you go, every store, every restaurant, all have help wanted signs in the windows. And part of it is the cost of living. You can't really afford to pay anyone the cost that it would take to live here. So there's like a dearth of supply for workers. And then at the same time, Oakland, there's just not a lot of grocery stores to begin with. And so then they're smaller, and because they're fewer, then, there's more people going to the ones that are there. So anyway, these lines are crazy long, and it drives me nuts because I usually am buying like one thing, and I spend, all this time being 10 minutes, in line for this one thing. And what's really bad is when it's ice cream, because the whole time I'm like, this is melting.